The storm hit Marcus Chen's cabin like a freight train made of ice and fury. Lightning split the Montana sky, illuminating the dense pine forest that surrounded his isolated home. He'd chosen this place precisely for its remoteness. After Sarah's death, he couldn't bear the pitying looks of neighbors or the constant reminders of the life they planned together. Thunder crashed overhead as he stoked the fireplace, the orange flames casting dancing shadows across the empty rooms. 3 years of solitude had carved deep lines into his face, and his once bright eyes now held the hollow weight of a man who'd forgotten how to hope. The cabin felt enormous and suffocating all at once, filled with ghosts of laughter that would never return. A sound pierced the storm's roar, not thunder, but something metallic and wrong. Marcus froze, his hand gripping the poker. Through the rain-lashed windows, an eerie blue glow painted the tree line. The light pulsed weakly, like a dying star, before fading entirely. Something had crashed in his woods. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and rain jacket, hesitating at the door. Every instinct screamed at him to stay inside, to pretend he'd seen nothing. But Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. "You can't save everyone, but you can't ignore everyone either." She'd said that about the stray animals he used to bring home, back when saving something still felt possible. The forest was a maze of shadows and streaming water. Branches whipped at his face as he followed the scent of burning metal and ozone. His flashlight beam swept across broken trees and scorched earth until it found the source. A craft unlike anything he'd ever seen, its hull a twisted mass of what looked like crystallized light and living metal. Steam rose from the wreckage, and something moved inside. Marcus approached cautiously, his heart hammering against his ribs. Through a gaping hole in the craft's side, he could see movement, deliberate, purposeful, desperate. His flashlight beam revealed something that made his breath catch in his throat. A creature knelt inside the wreckage, and she was unmistakably a mother. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent quality that shifted between silver and deep purple, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light. She was humanoid but otherworldly, tall and elegant, with elongated limbs and features that were both alien and achingly familiar. Her large eyes, the color of distant nebulae, held a universal language of love and terror as she clutched something to her chest. A baby, alien, but undeniably an infant no larger than a human newborn. Its tiny body glowed faintly, the same patterns as its mother's skin flickering weakly like dying embers. The mother looked up at Marcus, and their eyes met across the impossible gulf between their species. In that moment, he saw everything. The crash that had torn her from the stars, the desperation of a parent watching her child fade, the crushing weight of being utterly alone in a hostile universe. She tried to stand but collapsed, her body racked with shuddering breaths. Dark fluid, blood, he realized, seeped from wounds across her torso. She was dying, and her baby was dying with her. The mother's eyes never left his face as she did something that shattered every wall Marcus had built around his heart. With tremendous effort, she lifted her child toward him, her expression pleading. The universal gesture of a parent's last hope. Take my baby, save what I cannot. Marcus stepped forward without thinking, his hands trembling as he reached for the tiny life. The infant was impossibly light, its skin warm despite the cold rain. As soon as he touched the child, the mother's tension seemed to ease slightly, but her eyes remained fixed on his, full of questions she couldn't voice. "I don't understand," Marcus whispered, though he knew she couldn't comprehend his words. "What are you? What happened to you?" The mother struggled to her feet, swaying dangerously. She pointed to the sky, then to her child, then pressed her hand to her chest. Her meaning was crystal clear. They came from above. They were fleeing something, and the baby needed help she couldn't provide. As if summoned by his thoughts, new lights appeared in the storm clouds, harsh, searching beams that swept across the forest canopy. The mother's eyes widened in terror, and she grabbed Marcus's arm with surprising strength. She pulled him and her baby toward the forest, away from the lights, her movements frantic with fear. They weren't just refugees, Marcus realized with growing dread. They were being hunted. The mother stumbled again, her strength failing rapidly. Marcus caught her before she fell, feeling the alien warmth of her skin and the desperate rhythm of her breathing. In his arms, her baby made soft sounds that transcended species, the cries of a hungry, frightened infant who needed protection. You're not just refugees, you're carrying their greatest threat. And their greatest prize, Lyra confirmed. They will not stop. They will tear this world apart before they let us escape. From the ships came the hunters, beings that made Marcus's blood freeze. They moved like shadows given substance, tall and unnaturally thin, with limbs that bent at impossible angles. Their faces were hidden behind masks that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and where they stepped, the grass withered and died. "Stay here," Marcus whispered, but Lyra grabbed his arm. "They will search everywhere. We need to run." "Where?" "They'll see us the moment we leave the greenhouse." Lyra looked around desperately, then her gaze fixed on something Marcus had forgotten about, the old mine shaft Sarah had discovered during their first year at the cabin. It was hidden behind the greenhouse, camouflaged by decades of overgrowth. They'd explored it once, finding it led deep into the mountain before connecting to a network of natural caves. There, Lyra pointed. "Underground. Can you get us there without being seen?" Marcus nodded, his mind racing. The mine entrance was only 20 feet away, but those 20 feet might as well have been 20 miles with the Devourer ships scanning everything. He needed a distraction. "Wait here for my signal," he told Lyra, then did something that would have seemed insane an hour ago. He kissed Echo's tiny forehead. The baby's skin was warm and soft, utterly normal except for the faint luminescence that marked its alien heritage. "Take care of your ma, little one." Marcus slipped out of the greenhouse through the back door, moving low through Sarah's old garden. The Devourers had spread out, systematically searching his property with instruments that hummed with malevolent energy. One of them was approaching the greenhouse, its mask turning toward the structure with predatory interest. He had maybe 30 seconds. Marcus ran for the cabin, making no attempt at stealth. The Devourers turned toward him immediately, their attention focusing like laser beams. He burst through his front door and grabbed the first thing he could find. Sarah's old camping lantern, the kind with LED lights that could be seen for miles. "Hey!" he shouted, stepping onto his porch with the lantern blazing. "Looking for something." The Devourers moved toward him with fluid grace, their forms seemed to flow rather than walk. The closest one spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "Human, you will tell us what you have seen." "I saw a ship crash," Marcus replied, backing slowly toward the far side of his porch, drawing them away from the greenhouse. "Big, bright, made a hell of a noise. Happened about 2 miles north of here." Behind the Devourers, he saw the greenhouse door open slightly. Lyra emerged with Echo, moving like a ghost toward the mine entrance. She was still weak, stumbling occasionally, but determination drove her forward. "You lie," the Devourer hissed. "We smell their essence here. The woman, the child." Marcus kept backing away, the lantern held high. "Don't know what you're talking about. Haven't seen any woman or child. Just a crashed ship that's probably buried itself deep in the forest by now." The Devourer raised one impossibly long arm, and Marcus felt something cold wrap around his mind. A probing, invasive presence that tried to tear through his thoughts. He fought against it, focusing on misleading images. The crash site 2 miles away, empty forests, anything but the truth. But the alien probe was too strong, and Marcus felt his mental defenses crumbling. The Devourer would know about Lyra and Echo in seconds. That's when the lights went out. Not just his lantern, every light for miles around. The Devourer ships, their scanning equipment, even the stars seemed to dim. The only illumination came from a soft glow emanating from the mine entrance, where Echo's tiny form pulsed with increasing brightness. Impossible, the Devourer breathed. The Lightbringer awakens. The creature abandoned Marcus immediately, rushing toward the mine entrance along with its companions. But they were too late. Lyra had vanished into the darkness with her child, and the mine entrance sealed itself behind them with a sound like singing crystal. Marcus ran toward the sealed entrance, panic rising in his chest. Lyra. Echo. He pressed his hands against the crystalline barrier that now blocked the mine shaft, feeling warmth pulse beneath his palms. From within the earth came Lyra's voice, somehow transmitted through the crystal. Marcus, thank you, but you cannot follow. Echo's power is awakening, but it's dangerous. The whole mountain could collapse. You can't stay down there forever. We will find another way out. The caves connect to the river system, 20 miles east. If we survive, if Echo's power doesn't consume us both, we will meet you there. 3 days. Too much, Lyra whispered as Marcus carried them both to shore. Echo's power, too strong. Nearly killed us both. Marcus laid them on the blankets he prepared, studying Echo's tiny form with growing alarm. The baby's skin wasn't just glowing. It was practically incandescent, pulsing with energy that made the air shimmer around its small body. What's happening to Echo? Lightbringer powers manifest early under stress, Lyra explained weakly. Echo is trying to heal the damage the Devourers have done, but there's too much pain in this region. The crashed ship, the withered earth where they landed, the fear and death they bring. Echo feels it all, and wants to fix everything at once. That'll kill a baby, even an alien one. Yes, Lyra's eyes filled with tears that glowed like liquid stars. I don't know how to help. On my world, there were others who could guide young Lightbringers, teach them control. But they're all gone now. I'm alone with a power I don't understand. Marcus looked at Echo, remembering the warmth he'd felt when touching the crystal barrier, the sense of connection to something beautiful and vast. Maybe you're not alone. Before Lyra could ask what he meant, Echo's glow intensified dramatically. The baby's unconscious form lifted slightly off the blanket, surrounded by a nimbus of pure light that made everything around them look dull by comparison. No, Lyra gasped, reaching for her child. Too much, too fast. Echo will burn out. Marcus moved without thinking, placing his hands on either side of Echo's glowing form. The moment he made contact, energy surged through him, not painful, but overwhelming in its intensity. Through that connection, he felt what Echo felt. The vast network of pain and corruption the Devourers had spread across the region, the desperate need to heal and restore, the baby's instinctive drive to fix everything wrong with the world. But he also felt Echo's terror and confusion, the overwhelming flood of sensation that the baby couldn't process or control. Echo wasn't trying to show off cosmic power. The baby was having the equivalent of a sensory overload meltdown, except instead of crying, it was accidentally channeling enough energy to level mountains. Hey there, little one, Marcus whispered, pouring every ounce of fatherly instinct he possessed into that connection. I know it's scary. I know there's too much wrong with the world. But you don't have to fix everything right now. Through the connection, he felt Echo's response, wordless but unmistakable relief at having someone else share the overwhelming burden. Marcus found himself guiding the baby's power, helping it focus on smaller, manageable tasks. Instead of trying to heal an entire region, they worked together to purify the water around them, to encourage new growth in a small patch of withered grass. Gradually, Echo's glow dimmed to manageable levels. The baby's form settled back onto the blanket, and its breathing became calm and regular. For the first time since emerging from the river, Echo looked like what it was: a tiny, vulnerable infant who needed protection and care. Lyra stared at Marcus in amazement. How did you do that? You're not luminary. You shouldn't be able to connect with Lightbringer energy. Marcus looked at his hands, still tingling with residual warmth from the connection. I don't know. Maybe it's because I needed Echo as much as Echo needed me. Maybe some kinds of love transcend species. Or maybe, Lyra said softly, Echo has been changing you since the moment you first touched my child. Lightbringers don't just heal. They create bonds, forge connections between all living things. You've been chosen, Marcus. Echo has made you family in ways deeper than blood or species. Before Marcus could process what that meant, the night sky lit up with harsh searchlights. The Devourer ships had found them, drawn by the massive energy discharge of Echo's awakening. The dark vessels descended like falling stars, their scanning beams sweeping the riverbank. We have to run, Marcus said, gathering Echo while helping Lyra to her feet. Where? Lyra asked desperately. They'll follow Echo's energy signature anywhere we go. And after what just happened, Echo's power is too unstable to seal us underground again. Marcus looked at the approaching ships, then at the baby in his arms. His baby now, he realized, in all the ways that mattered. Echo had claimed him as family, and he'd accepted that claim with his whole heart. Then we don't run, he said quietly. We fight. Fight. Marcus, we're talking about the Devourers. They consume entire civilizations. What can two adults and a baby do against them? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since Sarah's death, it was a smile full of fierce joy rather than hollow politeness. We're not just two adults and a baby. We're a family. And I've learned something about families. They're willing to do impossible things to protect each other. The Devourers were attacking the crystal barrier now, their weapons carving deep furrows in the alien material. But it held firm. For now. How will I find you? Marcus called. Follow the light, came Lyra's fading reply. Echo's light. It will guide you when the time comes. The Devourer leader turned back to Marcus, its mask reflecting none of the crystal's warm glow. Human. You have interfered with matters beyond your understanding. The consequences will be severe. Then you don't know humans very well, Marcus replied, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. We specialize in interfering with things beyond our understanding. The Devourer moved closer, its presence making the air itself feel heavy and wrong. The Lightbringer cannot hide forever. When it emerges, we will be waiting. And you, human, will pay for your foolishness. Maybe, Marcus said, but right now, you've got nothing. And every minute you waste threatening me is another minute they get farther away. The Devourer stared at him for a long moment, then turned back to its companions. They redoubled their assault on the crystal barrier, but Marcus could see it was futile. Whatever Echo had done to seal the mine entrance, it was beyond their ability to break quickly. As dawn approached, the Devourer ships lifted off, beginning a systematic search of the surrounding mountains. Marcus watched them go, then looked back at the sealed mine entrance. The crystal had dimmed but still pulsed with a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. 3 days. He had 3 days to figure out how to help a desperate alien mother and her impossibly powerful child escape from hunters who would never give up. Marcus looked at his hands, still tingling from contact with Echo's crystal barrier. Something had changed in him during those moments of contact. A warmth spreading through his body, a sense of connection to something vast and beautiful. Whatever was happening to him, whatever price he'd have to pay, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wouldn't abandon Lyra and Echo. They'd become his family in the span of a single night, filling the empty spaces in his heart that Sarah's death had carved out. The hunt was just beginning, but Marcus Chen was no longer the broken man who'd hidden in these mountains for 3 years. He had something to protect again, something worth fighting for. And he intended to fight with everything he had. Marcus spent the next 2 days transforming himself from a grieving hermit into a one-man resistance operation. He'd always been handy, Sarah used to tease him about being able to fix anything except a broken heart, but now those skills took on desperate urgency. The Devourer ships continued their systematic search, their dark hulls casting shadows across the mountain range as they hunted for any trace of Echo's energy signature. Marcus watched them through binoculars, learning their patterns, timing their sweeps. They were thorough but not omniscient, and they seemed to have trouble detecting anything more than a few miles from their ships. On the morning of the second day, he loaded his pickup truck with supplies and drove to the rendezvous point, a section of the Clearwater River 20 miles east, where underground springs fed into a series of pools hidden by dense forest. If Lara had been right about the cave systems connecting to the river, this is where they'd emerge. Setting up camp near the water, Marcus tried to ignore the growing certainty that he was waiting for ghosts. 2 days underground with a newborn baby, even an alien one, seemed impossible. And Echo's power awakening. What did that even mean? Lyra had seemed terrified of it, as if her own child might accidentally destroy them both. As the sun set on the second day, Marcus sat by the riverbank and allowed himself to grieve. Not just for Lyra and Echo, but for Sarah, for the children they'd never had, for all the opportunities to be a father that life had stolen from him. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. The moment he'd found something to protect again, it had been ripped away. That's when the water began to glow. It started as just a shimmer beneath the surface, like moonlight on ripples. But the glow intensified, spreading upstream from the hidden springs until the entire river pulsed with soft luminescence. Marcus stood, his heart hammering, as something moved beneath the glowing water. Lara emerged first, gasping and exhausted, her opalescent skin flickering weakly. She was barely conscious, supported by currents that seemed to move independently of the river's natural flow. In her arms, wrapped in what looked like crystallized water, was Echo. Marcus waded into the river without hesitation, catching Lyra as she collapsed. The baby in her arms was unconscious but breathing, its tiny chest rising and falling in a rhythm that seemed to match the pulsing glow of the water around them. Marcus stopped running, his heart clenching at hearing that word, Papa, spoken with such trust and love. Echo, you're just a baby. I can't let you. I was never just a baby, Echo replied, the mental voice carrying wisdom that belonged to someone far older. The memories of all previous Lightbringers flow through me. I know what I must do. Lyra looked between Marcus and her child, understanding passing between them. The transformation, she whispered. It's happening faster than ever recorded. Echo is becoming what we hoped, but at such a cost. Marcus knelt and gently placed Echo on the forest floor. The baby's tiny form was now blazing with light so intense it turned night into day for hundreds of yards in every direction. But instead of the chaotic energy from before, this light felt controlled, purposeful. Stay back, both of you. Echo's voice carried new authority. What comes next, I must do alone. The Devourers burst through the tree line, their masks reflecting Echo's brilliance like dark mirrors. They stopped abruptly when they saw the blazing infant, their predatory confidence replaced by something Marcus had never expected to see from them. Fear. Impossible. The lead Devourer breathed. Full manifestation this young. The legends spoke of such things, but we thought them myths. Echo rose from the ground, floating 3 feet in the air, tiny arms spread wide. When the baby spoke, it was audible now, a voice that carried the harmony of distant stars. I am Echo, last of the Lightbringers, heir to the songs of dead worlds. You have consumed enough. Your hunger ends here. One child cannot stop the Devourers, the leader snarled, but Marcus heard uncertainty in its voice. We are legion. We have consumed 1,000 worlds, absorbed the life force of countless civilizations. Yes, Echo replied, the baby's voice carrying infinite sadness. I feel their pain within you. All the worlds you've destroyed, all the lives you've consumed, they are still there, trapped and screaming in your darkness. but I can free them. The baby's light pulsed, and suddenly Marcus could see what Echo saw, the true nature of the Devourers. They weren't just conquerors or parasites. They were prisons, each one containing the tortured souls of entire civilizations, kept alive and conscious to fuel their captors' power. You cannot release what we have claimed, the Devourer leader said, but its companions were already backing away from Echo's blazing form. The consumed are part of us now. To free them would destroy us. Yes, Echo said simply. It would. The baby's light exploded outward in a wave that washed over the Devourers like a cleansing tide. Where it touched them, their shadow-wreathed forms began to change, becoming translucent. And within that transparency, Marcus saw them, thousands upon thousands of beings from across the galaxy, all the civilizations the Devourers had consumed over millennia. They were still alive, still conscious, trapped in eternal torment to feed their captors' hunger. We forgive you, Echo said to the Devourers, even as the baby's power began tearing their prison bodies apart. You were hungry, and hunger makes people do terrible things. But the ones you've trapped have suffered enough. The Devourers screamed as Echo's light pulled the consumed souls free, but their cries weren't entirely of pain. Mixed with their agony was something else, relief. For the first time in eons, they were free of the constant hunger that had driven them to such terrible acts. As the freed souls rose into the night sky like luminous butterflies, Marcus felt their gratitude wash over him. Entire species that had been extinct for millennia whispered their thanks as they finally moved on to whatever came after life. But the effort was costing Echo dearly. The baby's tiny form was burning like a star, using up life force at an unsustainable rate. Marcus could feel through their connection that Echo was dying, burning out like a candle in a hurricane. Echo, stop. Marcus cried, reaching for the floating child. You're killing yourself. Not dying, Papa, Echo replied, the mental voice growing fainter. Changing. Lightbringers don't live long in their full power. We burn too bright. But we leave seas behind. Marcus felt it then, energy flowing from Echo into him, and into Lyra, and somehow into the very earth around them. Not the destructive force of the baby's awakening, but something gentler, more permanent. The seeds of healing that would grow long after Echo was gone. You were right, Papa, Echo whispered as the last of the Devourers dissolved, their consumed souls finally free to find peace. Love does transcend species. The love you showed us, the family you gave us, that's what made this possible. The baby's light began to fade, the tiny form settling gently back to the ground. Marcus caught Echo in his arms, feeling the warmth leaving the little body even as something new kindled in his own heart, the light recognizing itself. Marcus felt it too, through the connection that Echo's transformation had forged between them. Every refugee they helped, every act of kindness they facilitated, every moment of hope they nurtured. It all fed back into the growing network of light that their baby had seeded across the galaxy. A soft chime indicated someone approaching the front entrance. Marcus looked up to see Sarah Okafor, the Foundation's newly appointed Director of Operations, escorting a figure that made his breath catch in his throat. The visitor was unmistakably human, but somehow more, taller than normal, with skin that held an inner luminescence and eyes that sparkled like captured starlight. When she smiled, Marcus felt an impossible surge of recognition and joy. "Hello, Papa," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond human hearing. "I told you seeds, remember?" Marcus stared, his heart racing. "Echo?" "Not exactly," the figure replied, moving with fluid grace that spoke of someone who had learned to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "I'm what Echo became, the part of your child that chose to remain connected to the physical universe. I'm the guardian of all the seeds our sacrifice planted." Lyra gasped, reaching out instinctively toward this impossible visitor. "But you died. We felt you die." "Death is just transformation," Echo's guardian aspect explained, taking Lyra's hands with infinite gentleness. What you felt was the old form burning away so the new one could grow. I exist now in every act of healing, every moment of hope, every choice to love instead of fear. But sometimes, when the work requires it, I can focus myself into forms like this. Marcus found his voice finally. Why now? What work requires this? Echo's guardian gestured toward the window, where more ships were descending from the evening sky, not refugees this time, but sleek vessels bearing the insignia of various galactic powers. The Council has reached a decision, she explained. Earth is to be declared a protectorate, neutral territory under galactic law, protected from any aggressive action. But they want to station observers here, scientists and military advisors to study how the healing effect works. And that's a problem because, Marcus asked, though he already suspected the answer. Because they want to weaponize it, Lyra said grimly. Turn healing into a tool of conquest, use Echo's gift to create super soldiers or enhance their own populations while denying it to their enemies. Echo's guardian nodded sadly. The same hunger that drove the Devourers, just in a different form. They look at our sanctuary and see only strategic advantage, at our refugees and see only research subjects. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, not the cold fury of his hermit years, but the protective rage of a father whose family was threatened. Then what do? We remind them what they're dealing with. Echo's guardian replied, her luminescent skin beginning to brighten. Show them that the light cannot be controlled, only honored. That healing doesn't come from technology or manipulation, but from the conscious choice to value all life. The ships outside began landing, disgorging teams of officials and scientists who moved with the purposeful efficiency of people planning to take control of something they didn't understand. Together? Echo's guardian asked, extending her hands to Marcus and Lyra. Marcus took one hand while Lyra took the other, and immediately felt the connection that Echo's original sacrifice had forged, not just between the three of them, but extending outward to encompass every refugee they'd helped, every child playing in their gardens, every being who had found sanctuary in this place of healing. The light that rose from their joined hands wasn't the blazing intensity of Echo's final battle with the Devourers. This was something gentler, but no less powerful. The warm illumination of a home where all were welcome, of a family expanded beyond the boundaries of species or origin. The visiting officials stopped in their tracks as the light washed over them, their aggressive postures melting into wonder and confusion. Through the connection, Marcus felt their thoughts, the sudden understanding that they weren't dealing with a resource to be exploited, but with something sacred that could only be diminished by their interference. The sanctuary remains neutral, Echo's guardian announced, her voice carrying to every ship in the sky and every delegation on the ground. All who come in peace are welcome. All who come with hunger in their hearts, the hunger to control, to possess, to use others for their own gain, will find only the mirror of their own emptiness. One by one, the officials returned to their ships, not in defeat, but in the kind of humble retreat that comes from encountering something that reframes all your assumptions about power and purpose. Marcus bundled the baby in blankets and helped the mother to her feet. The greenhouse was only 50 yards from the cabin, but it felt like miles as they struggled through the rain. The mother's fever was getting worse, and she was leaving more of those glowing blood drops with every step. Inside the greenhouse, surrounded by Sarah's carefully tended plants growing under banks of LED lights, the mother seemed to gain a spark of strength. She moved among the vegetables with purpose, her hands glowing as she touched the leaves. Where her fingers made contact, the plants began to change, their cells restructuring themselves in ways that defied Earth biology. "This will work," she whispered, gathering the transformed vegetation. "But I need your device." She pointed at the LED light panels. Marcus helped her position herself under the lights, and what happened next was unlike anything he'd ever witnessed. The mother's skin began to absorb the artificial sunlight, the patterns across her body pulsing brighter with each passing second. The vegetables in her hands dissolved, not rotting but transforming, becoming something liquid and luminous. She lifted the glowing substance to her lips and drank deeply. Almost immediately, her wounds began to close, and her fevered skin cooled to a more normal temperature. When she finished, she looked at her baby with renewed strength and purpose. "Now for little one," she said, her voice steadier. She repeated the process, but this time the liquid she created was different, paler, more delicate, clearly meant for an infant's digestive system. The baby took to the alien formula immediately, its cries quieting as it fed. The tiny creature's skin grew brighter with each sip, and its movements became more animated. Marcus watched the feeding with fascination and growing concern. "What are you?" he asked softly. "Where did you come from?" The mother looked at him while her baby fed, her nebula-colored eyes reflecting depths of sadness and determination. "We are Luminari," she said, "from the seventh ring, beyond your outer worlds. I am Lyra. This is—" she paused, looking down at her child. "In your language, Echo. Why are you here? Why are you being hunted?" Lyra's expression darkened. "War. The Devourer clans consume worlds, absorb life energy. They hunt those who flee. I escaped with Echo, but they followed. Crashed here by accident." She met his eyes. "Your world, it was not our destination. Where were you going?" "Sanctuary worlds, safe places for refugees. But now—" She looked around the greenhouse, at the plants that had saved her life, at Marcus who had risked everything for strangers. "Now I do not know if we can leave. Ship destroyed. Hunters in your sky. And Echo is so young, so fragile." Marcus felt the weight of their situation settling on his shoulders. These weren't just aliens. They were war refugees, a mother and child fleeing genocide. And now their hunters were here, on Earth, probably turning the planet upside down looking for them. "The lights we saw," he said. "Those were the hunters." Lyra nodded grimly. "Devourer ships. They will not give up. They cannot afford to let us live." She looked at her baby, now contentedly finishing its meal. "Echo carries something they want, something they fear." "What?" But before Lyra could answer, the lights returned, harsh, searching beams that turned the greenhouse into a fishbowl. Through the transparent walls, Marcus could see shapes moving in the sky, enormous and predatory. The hunters had found them. The Devourer ships descended like mechanical vultures, their searchlights turning night into harsh, unforgiving day. Marcus killed the greenhouse lights and pulled Lyra and Echo behind the grow tables, his heart pounding so hard he was sure the aliens could hear it from orbit. Through the greenhouse glass, he watched the ships land in his front yard. 3 craft that looked like they'd been grown rather than built, their hulls covered in what appeared to be living armor that pulsed with dark energy. They were nothing like Lyra's vessel, which had been beautiful in its alien way. These ships radiated malevolence as if their very presence corrupted the air around them. "Don't let them see Echo," Lyra whispered urgently, clutching her baby to her chest. "Whatever happens, they cannot know about Echo." "Why? What makes your baby so special?" Lyra's eyes filled with terror and something else. Hope, desperate and fragile. "Echo is not just my child. Echo is the last of the Lightbringers, born with the power to heal worlds the Devourers have consumed. If they capture Echo—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus stared at the tiny alien infant, trying to process what Lyra had just told him. This baby, this fragile, dependent creature, was some kind of cosmic healer. The last hope for entire worlds. "That's why they're hunting you so hard," he whispered. Above them, the searching lights grew brighter and more numerous. Whatever was hunting this mother and child was closing in fast, and Marcus had perhaps minutes to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. The mother looked at him one more time, her eyes holding a depth of gratitude and terror that needed no translation. She had placed her most precious possession in the hands of a stranger from another world, betting everything on the kindness of a species she'd never encountered. Marcus looked down at the baby in his arms, then back at the dying mother who had trusted him with everything that mattered. The decision, when it came, felt as natural as breathing. "Come on," he said softly, supporting the mother's weight as the lights above grew closer. "Let's get you both home." Getting them back to the cabin was like carrying moonlight and starfire through a nightmare. The mother could barely walk, leaning heavily against Marcus as they stumbled through the storm-lashed forest. Her alien blood left a trail of luminescent drops that faded quickly in the rain, but Marcus knew their hunters could probably track them anyway. The baby, he couldn't keep thinking of it as the baby forever, made soft chirping sounds that reminded him of songbirds at dawn. Its tiny hands grasped at the air with movements too coordinated for a human newborn, and its eyes, when they opened, held an intelligence that was both ancient and utterly innocent. "Almost there," Marcus whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was comforting the mother or himself. The cabin's lights appeared through the trees like a beacon of sanctuary. But sanctuary for whom? He was harboring aliens on Earth, possibly war refugees, definitely being pursued by forces beyond his comprehension. The mother stumbled as they reached the porch, her strength completely gone. Marcus caught her before she collapsed, feeling the alarming heat radiating from her body. She was burning up with fever, her opalescent skin flickering erratically like a failing light bulb. Inside the cabin, Marcus gently settled the mother on his couch while cradling her child. Up close, under the warm lamplight, he could see the extent of her injuries. The wounds across her torso weren't just cuts. They looked like energy burns, the edges cauterized and still glowing faintly. Whatever had hurt her wasn't using conventional weapons. The baby's cries grew more insistent, and the mother's eyes fluttered open. She looked at her child with such profound love that Marcus felt his throat tighten. She tried to reach for the infant, but her arm fell back, too weak to complete the gesture. "Hungry," she whispered, the word distorted by her alien vocal cords, but unmistakably English. "Baby, hungry." Marcus stared at her in shock. "You can speak English." The mother's eyes focused on him with effort. "Learn, quick. Baby needs food." Her voice was like wind through crystal chimes, beautiful and otherworldly, but fading fast. "Please. What do you eat? What does the baby eat?" The mother tried to lift herself, her face contorting with pain. She pointed to a device attached to her wrist, something that looked like jewelry but pulsed with the same inner light as her skin. With trembling fingers, she activated it, and a holographic image appeared in the air above them. The image showed plant matter, fruits and vegetables, but not from Earth. The alien produce glowed with bioluminescence, and some of it moved as if alive. Then the image changed, showing the same foods but processed, broken down into a liquid that glowed like liquid starlight. "Synthesizer. Broken," the mother gasped. "Baby drinks. Light food. I can make from plants, but need strength." Marcus understood. The baby needed some kind of processed nutrition, and the mother could create it from plant matter, but she was too weak to do so. And whatever that process was, it required the synthesizer on her wrist, which had clearly been damaged in the crash. "Wait here," he said unnecessarily. She couldn't go anywhere. He ran to his kitchen and grabbed everything green he could find. Lettuce, spinach, herbs from Sarah's old garden that he'd somehow kept alive. When he returned, the baby's cries had grown weaker, more desperate. The mother looked at the earth vegetables with growing distress. Not right. Frequency. Need. She struggled for the words. Light inside. Growing light. Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. The baby was starving, and he had no way to help. But then he remembered something. The greenhouse Sarah had built behind the cabin. where she'd grown vegetables under full-spectrum LED lights that mimicked sunlight perfectly. "Light," he said suddenly. "You need plants grown under artificial light." The mother's eyes widened with hope. "Yes, light-fed plants. Can change. Can make food." "I love you too, Echo," Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face. "My brave, impossible child." "Not goodbye, Papa," came Echo's final message, so faint Marcus almost missed it. "Seeds remember. Love remembers. We'll see each other again in the light that grows from what we planted together." Echo's eyes closed, the ancient wisdom in them fading back to the innocence of a sleeping infant. But the light didn't go out entirely. It settled into Marcus and Lyra, into the forest around them, into the very air they breathed. Lyra knelt beside them, her own tears glowing like liquid starlight. "Echo was right," she said softly. "Lightbringers don't die, they transform, become part of the healing they create. Our child will live on in every act of kindness, every moment of hope, every family that chooses love over fear." Marcus held Echo's still form close, feeling the seeds of light growing in his heart. The baby had given everything to free the consumed souls, but in return had given Marcus and Lyra something precious: the power to heal, to help, to make sure that what happened to Echo's people never happened to anyone else. In the distance, the devourer ships were dissolving too, their crews freed to find whatever redemption awaited beings who had committed such terrible acts out of endless hunger. The threat was over, but the work, the healing, the growing, the nurturing of Echo's legacy was just beginning. Marcus looked at Lyra, seeing in her eyes the same determination he felt growing in his own heart. They were parents now to something larger than a single child. They were guardians of hope itself, keepers of the light their baby had planted in the darkness. The stars above seemed brighter somehow, as if Echo's sacrifice had kindled new suns across the galaxy. And in that brightness, Marcus thought he could see a familiar tiny face, smiling down at the family that had chosen love over fear. 6 months later, Marcus stood in what had once been his isolated cabin and marveled at how completely his world had changed. The simple structure had been expanded and reinforced, now serving as the headquarters for what the media had dubbed the Echo Foundation. Though Marcus preferred to think of it as simply an extension of the family that had begun with a desperate alien mother and her miraculous child. The Foundation's mission was straightforward: provide sanctuary for refugees, human and otherwise, who had nowhere else to turn. Word had somehow spread across interstellar networks that Earth, specifically a small cabin in Montana, was a safe haven for those fleeing persecution and war. They came in damaged ships and on foot, carrying children and hope in equal measure. Today's arrivals were a family of crystalline beings from the Andromeda sector, their bodies resonating with musical tones that spoke of worlds where thought became symphony. Yesterday, it had been a group of energy wraiths fleeing a dying star, and before that, a human colony ship that had been traveling for 3 generations to escape the resource wars of the inner systems. "The Jarnakas are settling in well," Lyra reported, entering Marcus's office with a cup of the herbal tea that had become their morning ritual. Her pregnancy was beginning to show, not Echo reborn, as they'd initially hoped, but new life that carried its own potential for wonder. Marcus accepted the tea gratefully, watching through the window as their latest refugees explored the expanded grounds. The Jarnakas moved like living music, their children chiming with laughter as they played with human kids and a dozen other young aliens who called the Foundation home. "Any word from the Oversight Committee?" he asked. Lyra grimaced. "The Galactic Council is still debating whether to officially recognize us as a neutral sanctuary world. Some species think we're too dangerous. Unpredictable humans with access to Lightbringer technology, they call us. Others want to use us as a weapons depot for whatever conflict they're planning next." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. In the months since Echo's sacrifice, they'd learned that the baby's gift had done more than just free the Devourer's victims. The seeds of healing Echo had planted were manifesting in unexpected ways. Chronic illnesses curing themselves, damaged ecosystems regenerating overnight, even psychological trauma healing at impossible rates. The effect was centered on the foundation, but spreading outward in ripples that grew stronger each day. Earth was becoming something new, a world where healing was as natural as breathing. It terrified some galactic powers and attracted others like moths to flame. "Let them debate," Marcus said. "We're not doing this for political recognition. We're doing it because it's right. And because Echo asked us to," Lyra added, placing a hand on her growing belly. "Sometimes I can feel the echo of our child's presence in this new life. Not reincarnation, but something more like remembrance." He looked down at Echo, who was watching him with those ancient, innocent eyes. "Besides, they want your baby, which means they're about to learn what happens when someone threatens a father's child." The first Devourer ship landed 50 yards away, disgorging its shadow-wreathed passengers onto the riverbank. But Marcus Chen was no longer the broken man they'd encountered 3 days ago. He was a father now, with everything that meant. And fathers, as the universe was about to learn, could be far more dangerous than cosmic empires when their children were threatened. The final confrontation was about to begin. The Devourers approached across the glowing riverbank like a tide of living darkness, their forms seeming to absorb the very starlight around them. Marcus counted 12 of them, moving with predatory coordination toward the spot where he stood with Lyra and Echo. Behind them, their ships hummed with malevolent energy, weapons charging for what they clearly expected to be a quick execution. "Surrender the Lightbringer," the lead Devourer commanded, its voice carrying harmonics that made Marcus's bones ache. "Your resistance has been noted and will be rewarded with swift death instead of prolonged consumption." "Counter offer," Marcus replied, shifting Echo to one arm while reaching into his backpack with the other. "You leave this planet, and I don't have to show you what happens when you threaten my family." The Devourer tilted its masked head, a gesture that somehow conveyed amusement and contempt simultaneously. "Your family? Human, you cannot comprehend the forces you face. We have devoured stars, consumed the light of entire galaxies. What can one primitive species do against?" Marcus pulled the pin from the first grenade. He'd spent 2 days preparing for this moment, using every survival skill Sarah had taught him and improvising several she hadn't. The grenades weren't military. He'd made them himself using fertilizer, diesel fuel, and components salvaged from his electronics. They wouldn't kill the Devourers, but they didn't need to. They just needed to create chaos. The explosion lit up the riverbank like a miniature sun, sending the lead Devourer staggering backward. Before it could recover, Marcus triggered the second part of his plan. A network of tripwires connected to homemade flashbang devices he positioned throughout the area. The night erupted in strobing light and deafening noise, designed to overwhelm the Devourer's enhanced senses. In the chaos, Marcus grabbed Lyra's hand and ran for the forest, following paths he'd scouted and marked over the past 2 days. "This is madness," Lyra gasped as they crashed through the undergrowth. "You cannot fight them with primitive explosives." "I'm not fighting them," Marcus replied, leaping over a fallen log while keeping Echo secure against his chest. "I'm annoying them." Big difference. Behind them, the Devourers recovered quickly from the surprise attack, their hunting cries echoing through the forest like the screams of dying worlds. But Marcus had spent 3 years living in these mountains, learning every trail, every hiding place, every cave Sarah had ever explored. This was his territory now. He led them through a maze of switchbacks and false trails, using every guerrilla tactic he could remember from old war movies and survival shows. More homemade explosives slowed their pursuers, while carefully placed mirrors reflected their searchlights back at them, creating visual confusion in the darkness. But Marcus knew he was only buying time. The Devourers were faster, stronger, and had technology that made his improvised weapons look like children's toys. Sooner or later, they'd corner him, and then it would be over. That's when Echo began to glow again. The baby's light started as a soft pulse, barely visible through the blanket wrapped around its tiny form. But as the devourers drew closer, Echo's luminescence intensified, casting dancing shadows through the trees. Echo. No, Lyra whispered urgently. Too dangerous. You're still too young to control it. But Marcus felt something different this time through his connection to the baby. Before, Echo's power had been wild, unfocused, driven by instinct and fear. Now there was purpose behind the light, intelligence that seemed far too mature for a newborn, but somehow fit perfectly with those ancient eyes. Through their bond, Marcus felt Echo's message. Trust me, Papa. I know what to do now. The thought should have been impossible. Babies didn't think in complex concepts, alien or otherwise. But as Echo's glow brightened, Marcus realized he was no longer dealing with an ordinary infant. The awakening of Echo's Lightbringer powers had accelerated the baby's development in ways that defied understanding. Let me down, Papa, came Echo's voice, not spoken aloud, but transmitted directly through their psychic connection. I can help now. As the ships departed, Echo's guardian began to fade, her physical form dispersing back into the network of light that connected all things. Will we see you again? Marcus asked. Every day, she replied, her voice becoming distant but no less warm. In every choice you make to help instead of harm, to include instead of exclude, to love instead of fear. I am the echo of what you taught me, Papa. That family isn't about blood or species, but about the willingness to care for each other across any distance. And the new baby? Lyra asked, placing both hands on her belly. What will this child become? Echo's guardian smiled, the expression visible even as her face faded into starlight. Whatever they choose to become. That's the gift you give by loving without conditions, the freedom to grow into their own light. She was gone then, dispersed back into the evening air, but Marcus felt her presence everywhere. In the laughter of alien children playing in gardens that grew impossibly fast and beautiful, in the grateful tears of refugees finding safety after years of running, in the quiet conversations between beings from different worlds, discovering they had more in common than they'd ever imagined. Marcus put his arm around Lyra, feeling their unborn child kick beneath his palm. Around them, the foundation settled into its evening rhythm. 100 different species sharing meals and stories, creating the kind of family that had never existed before, but somehow felt perfectly natural. Do you think we're doing right by Echo's memory? Lyra asked, leaning into Marcus's embrace. Marcus looked out at their impossible, wonderful family and felt Echo's presence like warm starlight on his face. I think we're doing exactly what any parent hopes for their child, making sure their love continues to grow and spread long after they're gone. Above them, the stars seemed to pulse with a familiar rhythm, and Marcus could have sworn he heard, carried on the evening breeze, the sound of a baby's contented laughter, not mourning for what was lost, but celebrating what had been planted and was growing still. The echo of love, it turned out, was the loudest sound in the universe.